Welcome to the Common Creative Podcast. My name is Paul Fairweather.
And my name is Chris Meredith, the very professional co-host of this journey to lift the lid on creativity at work, at home, the ideas of through the lens of ideas, and of course, imagery, which is very relevant for today's show.
Yeah, so Chris, today our guest is Peter Hickson, a very old, or not old, but a long-time friend of mine. I've known him for many, many years, and for about 30 odd of those years, he was my accountant. But Peter has, as we will soon find out, many facets to his life and personality.
Yeah, we're both, I think, giggling to ourselves because I think he's an artist that demonstrates how important it is to be joyful, to not take yourself too seriously, tell stories with your work, and just enjoy the journey of expressing yourself. I was so inspired by this show.
Yeah, no, it was really a good thing. So let's get him on.
Let's get him in.
Peter Hickson, welcome to the Common Creative Podcast.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chris. I'm glad
Peter,
to be here.
Great to meet you. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Peter, as we ask all our guests, can you give us a 60-second potted history about how you got to be where you are now? And look, I know your story, so I know that's going to be hard for you.
Thanks, Paul. My early years were on a cattle property in northwest Queensland, and I went to university, did a bit of engineering, and was asked not to come back. Then went, and the family were building a roadhouse, so I operated a roadhouse in northwest Queensland for about 2.5 years, which I think was a deliberate move of my father's to make sure I went back and got education. I decided to go back to Sydney University and do British UQ and do commerce, which was fantastic. My view was to go back to the land. I got a job in London, became a chartered accountant, and that's where my career started. Along the way, I've always been interested in artistic pursuits, which is pretty rare for an accountant. They do most of their work with a pencil, apparently. And so I drew when I was a kid, and then I started photography, and I also did a fair bit of welding and sculptures.
Yeah, so Peter, we mortals like our accountants to be creative.
Mm.
The tax department, not so much. So, look, you have had a creative journey, and you were my accountant for probably 30 odd years, and all that time you also did a lot of welding, often with found bits. I know we'd be walking along the street, you'd see a nut, and you go, oh, just pick that up and put in my own pocket.
Roadkill.
So do you want to just, before we get into photography, do you want to talk a little bit about the welding and the sculpture work?
As a kid, my father taught me to weld, and I always enjoyed welding, and when I finally moved to Brisbane, I found it was a connection to keep me a bit attached to the bush. So I set up a welder, and I used to mainly make furniture. And everyone used to say, we know it's your piece because no one can lift it. You might remember, Paul, there was a table in reception which took 5 guys to move. It was very heavy. I found that in a scrapyard out at Ipswich somewhere. I always enjoyed it, and it was a very creative thing, and it was your space where you could get away from everything else. But all that sort of ground to a little bit of a halt as the kids came along, and various other bits and pieces. At one stage, I'd entered some furniture in an exhibition at Karoi, and as my father said, you think they're going to let an accountant win this? No way. Anyway, someone saw it, and I ended up on that TV show with Shirl, Our House, and he came into the MHM office and said, interview, and we went from, don't talk, dob me into the tax office to, I hear you've got another side. And then we went and filmed underneath our house here at in Lutwyche. But that was fun.
Peter, is the sculpture and or photography, is it kind of like an antidote to accountancy? I'll tell you, before you answer, I'll tell you a quick confession. I actually studied engineering at university, came out of university, went for interviews to accountancy firms. I remember one of them pitching themselves as a really modern accountancy firm on the grounds they let you take your jacket off. And that was the moment I realized I was in the wrong spot. I wonder if is the sculpture, the photography, is it an antidote to the structures, formality, kind of the process of accountancy, or is it something that just exists in parallel?
Chris, I really enjoyed my career. I loved doing what I did, and I had so much interaction with people as well. In the system is that I would go and talk to, say, Paul, and chat about, what have you been up to, what are you doing, and then someone would come in and do all the work. It was For me, it was a very good system. And the creative side, the welding, the sculptures, was really just what I like to do as well. I never consider myself as I got caught in this terrible career where I was an accountant and I needed to escape here. It was just about making your life full.
Yes, yeah, lovely. I'd love to hear because we've mentioned sculpture, we're going to come on to talk about photography. Sounds like you're the kind of person that kind of just creates the whole time. And a lot of handicaps that creatives have, if I can put it that way, is that they find it much easier to start things than finish things. So you're picking stuff up, the sculpture, you've got a camera, you're taking photographs or whatever. How do you finish things? It's a challenge I have. That's why I'm keen to find out.
It is a challenge. The welding and the sculpture just finished because that was time. I was sort of moving on to photography and I didn't have time for most. I weld a few things every now and again, but I haven't done that. And I've got just out there's a huge pile of scrap of roadkill that someday I'm going to have to get rid of,
By roadkill, I'm assuming you're talking about things made of metal. This isn't...
You just pick up something off the road,
Yeah.
I can remember I was at a client's place. They were shipping out on the river and there was a half link of anchor chain in the car park, and there I am in my suit with the little lever trying to dig this thing out of the ground without anyone noticing I was doing it.
Well, let's move on a little bit to photography. I didn't really know about photography until, a couple of years after you retired. But you're really, it's not what I expected. It's sort of out there, particularly a series you've done recently, Australian Gothic, which is a lot of fun, including yourself as a subject as well. It talks about Australian Gothic.
Okay, so as Chris was talking about before, you don't necessarily finish projects and stuff, but what you do is if you take up a particular interest, such as photography, there's endless number of genres, and you start with sort of travel and landscape photography, and then you sort of move through all these other genres to portraiture stuff, and then you sort of go, oh yeah, I like that, you do it for a while, and then you think, it's not quite I haven't found my niche yet, I haven't found the genre that's right for me. And then I did a workshop with her, and you guys should talk to this woman, Charlie Savage. She's fantastic. Anyway, she did a workshop on creative photography, which meant you had to know something about Photoshop, which was the scariest thing I've ever done. But I just loved the fact that she created these surreal scenes from a series of photographs. I started doing all these different bits and pieces. I 2 Minutes to Midnight series. I did a early Australian pioneering series, and they were okay, but it wasn't quite me, and I craved to be in the photographs myself. While I'm an innately pretty ugly guy, I thought I could find my own place in photography. So I came up with this idea that was basically inspired partly by Grant Wood's American Gothic, where I could create these scenes that combined the Australian landscape, a sense of humour, and a lot of absurdity. And I started getting on that, and then I did one or two, and I enjoyed it. And my very good friend and mentor, John Lomas, says, this is a series, you've got to keep going. And I've probably been doing it for a year and a half, 2 years now. I've got probably about 20 images, and the idea is at some point in time to have an exhibition, and it's supposed to be funny, it's supposed to be humorous, it's not meant to be too serious, and I sort of become slightly obsessed by it now.
It sounds like, Beer, it is your niche. I mean, for listeners who don't know American Gothic, it's a famous painting, I think, by a guy called Grant Wood, depicting two figures, a man and a woman, in front of a barn. And I think it's the man that's holding a pitchfork. The other ones, I forget what they're holding, but the original is quite an austere painting that's sort of, it captures the kind of brutality of the Depression. And what I love is the fact you twisted that on its head and made it light. You made it very Australian, I think, by capturing a sense of humour and so perhaps putting yourself in there. But I guess what I'm working up to saying is it sounds like it's got a lot of, not just if you're in the pictures, there's a lot more of you in that picture than your physical presence. There's your sense of humour as well as your reflections on Australian country and that kind of connection with a famous work of art. Would that be fair? I see you distilled into that series.
I think that's right, Chris. It's one of the interesting things is growing up in northwest Queensland. This is back in the late 60s and early 70s. Nearly everything went wrong. You think, the pump wouldn't work. the car would break down, the windmill would stop working. And it was this constant deal with these things is to look at the funny side of things. And that's what I always thought was, there. So you'll laugh a bit about this and you'll laugh a bit about that. And I was always fascinated by the stories of the bush, and so, and the bits and pieces. And so that definitely influenced a lot of what you do. And it'll influence a lot of the pieces that I do. And there was one piece I did called, The Long Goodbye, which is a model called Annalise holding her chook called Bertha. And there's a table set up in front and there's a window with a view out there. And the table's got a whole lot of vegetables on it, and you can just see a handle of an axe coming up into the photo. And this was basically the idea behind this was that as kids in the bush, except for the dogs and cats, you had to eat all your pets at some point in time. So this was Bertha's long goodbye. She died of natural causes a bit later.
Peter, we'll put a link. I'm assuming your images are on Instagram. Are they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes. So, in terms of so you've learnt Photoshop, obviously. What do you like? But you do these things on sets. Like there's one in front of a barn. Have you gone and found a barn, or have you Photoshopped that in?
We don't have barns,
right?
So, what I essentially do is I look and I become a bit obsessed about it now. So I look for scenes that I think will suit an Australian Gothic. So driving around in the countryside down in South Australia, I came across this beautifully just harvested field, and it went forever with this very symmetry. Anyway, and then a bit further down the road, I photographed a bit further down the road. There was this big old dead tree, and I put that in the middle of the field. And then I've put myself and a model holding axes and say, chasing a bit of firewood. And that's that's the sort of thing I look for a scene, I look for an idea, and then sometimes they don't all come together. And so you tend to, and you collect stuff, I got pitchforks, I got spades, I've got deactivated rifles, I've got, axes and shears, and I've got everything.
I love it. Peter, I confess a lot of my photographs have overlays of rocks, eaves, waves, whatever it might be. And so when I'm out with my camera, I might stop at a pebble and take a photograph of this for 10 minutes. I have a strong connection with this idea. You're looking for those seeds. I imagine the rest of the world's thinking, you're nuts. What are you doing? How come, pitchfork? Who cares? And I get the same feedback, which is why are you obsessed with lichen? What is it about the lichen? And why I've got thousands of photographs of lichen and rocks. So it's a healthy obsession, I think.
Yeah, no, textures are beautiful to photograph.
Peter, as you drive around, and my parents live down near Killarney, and there's always lots of sheds, old timber sheds that had a lean on them. Whether the ground I think was moving or whatever it was. And I've always found those very interesting. There was one fantastic one halfway between Cunningham Gap and Brisbane, which is this 2-story hall, and it was like the Leaning Hall of Pisa. I think it's fallen down. So it really is quite fascinating to go look for those things.
I was thinking about someone listening to this show, and I'm thinking of you as almost like an accidental artist. You're just something you have to do. You just do it. Almost what thinking it's just kind of your intuition is guiding you. It'd be good to know if you think that's fair. But what advice have you got for somebody listening if maybe they're an accountant, maybe they're an engineer, something that's very structured, and they're going, I couldn't do that because I haven't got time, or it's too scary to put myself in a photograph. How have you embraced that creative side, I guess is what I'm asking. What gave you the confidence to weld stuff or pick up a camera and show it to the world?
As Paul would tell you, I probably don't lack much confidence. But I say that in all seriousness. So if the only thing I'm not very good at is walking onto someone's property and saying, can I take a photo of your shed over there? Because they might think I'm a bit of an idiot. It's a very hard question. I gave one of my old cameras to a friend the other day, and I said, you should just start taking photographs. And I said, if you take any photographs, he said, yeah, taking a few. It's either going to catch or it's not going to catch.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've lent a lot of people cameras, and some get very excited and some don't. I think you've either got it or you haven't got it, to a degree, you sort of. And if someone comes and says, I want your help to do this. It's very easy as opposed to, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Peter, I'm really fascinated because I was always fascinated by your thing of. So we talk a lot in the podcast with people about curiosity as being a sort of a key to creativity. But I see your thing as a sort of type of creativity, curiosity. But it's really this thing about noticing. You know, as you say, digging out a chain link from a car park, someone's business. You know, to picking up, you know, something a little table or some scrapyard. But you're doing the same thing with photography. You know, you're collecting images you've seen that then generate ideas. And I assume the same thing that happens with the skill. Can you sort of unpack that process at all about this, you know, sort of, you know, what it is or where it comes from, where you notice these things? Because so many people don't notice.
I think once you decide what your project's going to be or what your genre is going to be, your mind then becomes very in the background, very ordered. You're chasing a whole lot of things. You're chasing locations, you're chasing props, and you're chasing ideas. So the very first one I did was up at our property in the Gulf. We've got an old saddle shed, and so I photographed that old saddle shed, and I had myself and Lily Ray, who's sort of one of my main models.
I know her.
I put
Fantastic model.
right?
I know her.
Yeah.
Model.
Oh, she's fantastic. I love Lily. And I put Lily and I in front of the saddle shed, and it was called Home Sweet Home. And that was sort of the starting point. And then there'd be an old dam. I found very old photograph. We've had very good seasons recently of a dam that had a little puddle of water in it, and all the rest was just cracked mud. And I put us in that one, and I called it the swimming hole. And then you sort of start to think of all these different ideas, and they're sort of, and then now I've got a lot of ideas that I'm trying to find a scene for. So at the moment I'm doing one called A Feed of Fish, and so Lily and I are both holding pitchforks, and I've put a big barramundi on her pitchfork, and I've got this weaselly little fish on mine, because in most of my stuff, if you look at it, the females are the most dominant. They're holding more weapons or more things of danger than I ever am, and I've just got to get the background for that, because I want this like endless sand and sea, and then just there to put that into. So you're thinking of these ideas all the time, and then you've got to create the idea, and then sort of sort it out. So there's another one I've got where it's called Laundry Day, and I've got to get a tree with a rope between it, and I'm going to have 3 of the outfits that Lily wears on one side and 3 of the outfits of me, and I'm standing there in my underpants holding a bucket, and she's standing there in her underwear holding a bucket, and you know, because they're identical, they'll be identical outfits. Because that's all we ever wear, the same thing, you know, that sort of thing.
For listeners, I should explain, Lily Ray is a particularly beautiful model, and Peter, I hope you won't mind my saying you'd be a remarkable contrast to Lily. That's why I'm laughing. I can see this.
That could be the point, Chris. That could be the point.
Well, like all of us, Chris, like all of us on this podcast, Peter has a good face for radio. I was just thinking about your fish for dinner or whatever it's called. You should have a look at the late William Robinson's self-portrait with mullet.
All right.
We might give you some inspiration. One of the 2 self-portraits that won the Archibald Prize. I think he's in a yellow southwester.
I think I've seen it, actually. I think, yeah.
Holding up this mullet.
Yeah.
Harness with mullet or something it's called. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, I'm guessing I now know the answer to this one, but I've been laughing just in the way you describe your pictures. I haven't seen some of the ones that you described. Is that how you want people to respond? You want them to chuckle? You want them to get the joke? How do you like people to respond to your work?
When they get it, and they go, last year I entered in the photo club I'm in, an Australian Gothic in every competition for 10 months, right? And how well they went depended on judging night. They'd all come up on the screen there, and as soon as mine had come in, everyone knew that there was one coming, and they'd burst into laughter, because they're so. And that probably was the great satisfaction I got out of doing it, and the impetus to continue doing it.
Yes.
And to doing it, in that there are enough people out there that thought it was amusing and funny. At my 70th birthday recently, one of my friends who's a printer did a cutout of me in my Australian Gothic kit, and it was in the background of the party. So people were going up and having their photograph taken with it. And the rest
With you, with your other... In a funny kind of way, I wonder if a photography club is the right place for your work to be reviewed, because in a way it doesn't sound like photography, but typically people in photography clubs are obsessed with quality and pixels and lenses and stuff like that, and what often gets lost is the idea, a story, the idea that the image is supposed to evoke something. And I mean, I'm delighted that you haven't mentioned cameras, lenses, pixels, all that technical stuff. I wonder,
Sorry,
are you a photographer?
Is an exhibition and probably a book. That's where it'll end up. And your question is, am I a photographer? One of my images just won a silver medal in the state championships. So I think I can take a photo.
No, I didn't mean that in a...
Yeah, I know what you meant.
Okay.
So I'm actually thinking that you could consider doing a stand-up with a slideshow. I think it would be very, very funny.
I've done it. I'm doing it. I've already done one. And I bring Horace along, which is my alter ego, and I use lines like he's the quiet, silent type. He's not smart enough to be a bogan. And I've got quite I like it, and when I've done it, people are laughing, so it works well.
Well, you'll have to let me know next time you're doing it. I'd love to come along.
No worries.
What's next? Is American Gothic it? Or is there another project on the horizon? Or is it something else? It's not photography, not sculpture. Is there a different kind of medium you'll be looking at?
It hasn't come about yet, Chris, so I don't know what it is yet, but something will probably come up, because that's what happens, as you know. If something else comes in, you see something. There's two bits with... I'm trying to work out how on earth Horace, and I call Lily Ophelia or Offie, because I like, you can imagine them at the Eiffel Tower, or So, but I just, my mind hasn't got through that. One of my good friends, John Lomas, says the last one should be Offie and another model standing next to a pile of dirt with shovels. We finally killed him off.
Well, maybe you could go to New York. That's not a pitchfork.
Yeah.
Could you find the actual barn that was used for American Gothic? I wonder if you could find that and subvert that. Something.
Peter, sadly, we're drawing to a close. We always ask as a final question to our guest to give a piece of advice to our listeners about, pursuing, in your case, maybe, a creative outlet.
For anyone who'll ask me, I will advise them that they need things to do other than their work, see people that and lawyers are sort of almost the worst. They're obsessed with their work. When they finish work, they don't know what to do, half of them, they're just because it's become their obsession. So I encourage people to try and find something else to do. And whether it's bridge, whether it's mahjong, whether it's photography, whether it's painting, whether it's singing, whatever it is. But, you've got to look for something and find what you want to do. And then give it your best shot. And it's not easy, learning Photoshop, as Chris, is like going down 1,000 rabbit holes.
Yes. Yeah, terrifying, because there's no limit to what you can do with Photoshop, so you can find yourself spending hours and hours with it. I think the key, just one thing I've learned from you in this session, which would guide anyone if they have to play with Photoshop, you've got to know what you're looking for. You've got to know what the end result is. Otherwise, as you said, it's just a rabbit hole after a rabbit hole and a rabbit hole. So it's a tool that gets you what you want rather than just an empty palette.
Peter, I always do a sketch. I'm not taking notes. Chris, he's leaving.
Peter, stay with us. Hopefully we're going to see a photo. Oh, cool. Wonderful.
So I've got two. I can put that one next to it.
Yeah, great. Peter, look, thanks a lot. This has been a long time overdue. Very refreshing. I'm not quite sure if it was you or your alter ego that turned up. Really, really fantastic, and really enjoyed this chat. Thank you so much.
Having me. I really enjoyed it, and good luck to you guys going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Peter. A great pleasure to meet you, or Horace, should I say.
Well, that is fantastic. And look, the thing I've been thinking about after this conversation is that Peter really is multifaceted and talented. Like he was a very good accountant, and he had very good life balance. As he said, he loved his job because he had other people do the work. He was a really good sculptor, and now he's a fantastic photographer, and he's funny as get out.
Yes. And I'll tell you what's inspiring is I think a lot of what's behind his work is quite brave. I mean, he puts himself in the shots for a start, and it doesn't take himself seriously. Based on his descriptions, you might be in his underwear or something, standing next door to a very beautiful model, and hit that contrast is something that obviously he finds humorous, and I think I would find humorous. But behind that is a real bravery. I don't mind sharing my opinion of the world, of taking the mick out of a very famous American painting, American Gothic, and I think good on him for that. He's very comfortable with saying, this is the way I am, I don't mind what you think. I'm enjoying the process of sharing that with the world, and I think that's a real inspiration for every artist.
And look, I love what I really took out from it, in thinking about him unpacking this thing of, once he found the theme, it's become his obsession, and now he collects ideas, and he collects images, and he collects props. Before he used to just collect bits of metal that he then put together, for different things. So quite inspirational is certainly the word, and quite enjoyable.
Yeah.
So if you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the follow button. It's the best thing you can do for us and our future guests. And of course, give us a 5-star rating, not for Chris and I, but for Peter, for coming onto our show.
So yes, give us a rating, tell your friends, and let everyone know that we're on a mission to share the insights about creativity. Look forward to seeing you for next week's show.
See you then.